So thank you everyone for joining us. We're right at 1 o'clock and we have attendees that are coming in. My name is Stephanie Emmerich and I'm going to be your facilitator today. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box, any questions you have, any technical issues. We'll give it just a couple more minutes to get as many people connected as possible, and then we'll get started. And like I said, please have your chat box open and ask any questions throughout there. I'll keep an eye on it. We are recording this, so if you had coworkers or friends that couldn't make it, we will have the recording available for you. So we just want you to really participate and send us questions, comments, anything that you want to address as we go along, and know that you will get the link to the recording couple days after. We have to download it and get it all processed, so it works out. But we'll send that out to everyone. So if you want to share it with anyone afterwards or anything like that, we'll have that. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this so you can see our speakers. And today, thank you everyone for again joining us. And I know more people will be coming in as we get started. There we go. Move that over. My name is Stephanie Emmerich, and like I said, I'm the facilitator today, and I want to get us started. And I think we covered all the little housekeeping type of issues. So you're all here today for a conversation with Boys Town National Training, implementing a behavior management model with success. And so we have some guests here to have this conversation. We wanted to bring some experts who have great experiences to share with you. And so I want to have everyone have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with John McGuire. I'm going to turn it over to you. If you can introduce yourself, and then we will have our special guests introduce themselves.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. My name is John McGuire. I'm with Boys Town's National Resource and Training Center. I've been with Boys Town in a variety of capacities, off and on actually a couple different times since 1987. Kind of hurts to say that out loud, but that's my story. Actually, worked again with kids in a lot of different capacities, from our residential program at Boys Town to actually outside of Boys Town, where I taught in both Omaha Public Schools, as well as another district here in the Omaha area. Also had a chance to even teach at Boys Town schools. And have been a trainer over the years, different times. In fact, I even had a chance to do some training with Tara's school several years ago. And now my current role is a little bit different. I spend a lot of my time talking on the phone with people all around the country, lots of principals and superintendents from schools all over that are looking for resources and help. And so we get a chance to kind of talk with them and see if there's things that we have to offer that might be of service to them. And so that's what I do now. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll turn it back to Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, John. And so today, John and I are both with Boys Town, and for this conversation, we wanted to have some special guests join us. So today we have Tara Eckstein. I always pronounced it wrong. I even did it. I even made a note. Tara Eckstein she is an elementary principal at Horace Mann Middle School in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, right? Yes. And we have Tara, and then we have Jacqueline. Do you go by Jackie or Jacqueline? Jackie. Okay. Just want to make sure. So we have Jackie, and is Pasica? Was worried.
Close. Pasica.
Okay. Very good. Another Pasica. And your title is assistant principal?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I want to turn it over to you two to give us a little introduction, and then we're just going to get started with some Q&A and some questions. And so everybody who's joined us, as they're talking, please put some questions in the chat box too. So Jackie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll have Tara introduce herself.
Wonderful. Hi, I am Jackie Pasica. I have worked at Horace Mann for 10 years. I started as a student teacher here, and then was lucky enough to get hired here, and started that process when before we really had the Boys Town training as a teacher, and then was here when we went through the training process of that. And then I have been in this current role for the past 4 years as assistant principal. So I've been here through all of our transitions and been lucky and spoiled to be here through all of it.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you. We're so glad to have you here today to share all of your experiences and knowledge and stories. It's going to be awesome. So thank you. And now Tara, Tara, will you take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Tara Eckstein, and like Jackie, I feel blessed and honored to say I've been in the Sioux Falls School District for 23 years, with the last 17 here at Horace Mann. So I got to be here when it was half mainstream and had half a kind of a specialized program with the same implementation and expectations as all mainstreams across the district, but we just made them smaller class sizes for those students who were struggling. So we were a school within a school up until about the last 5 or 6 years, which would then we just kind of squeezed it down, and we're really working with mainstream students who just were struggling with that ability to regulate and providing that support that's necessary for them to be successful in all settings.
Awesome. Well, Tara, again, thank you both for taking time today to share with us. And so we're just going to jump right into the conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to John to ask our first question.
Okay. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I think our topic for today obviously is implementing a behavior program with success. And when I think about that, it's like, the success is the part that kind of comes after or down the road, right? Very rarely is the success right out of the gate. And full disclosure, Tara and I have known each other for 15 to 17 years, somewhere in there, and we've worked together in different capacities for a long, long time. So if we kind of go back to the very beginning, Tara, can you talk with us just a little bit about, when you first got to Horace Mann, that process of recognizing, hey, we might need to go outside for some help. Just talk to us a little bit about that process and how you kind of came to the realization that, we need to do something here.
I think teacher satisfaction was one of the big things that, gosh, there's a lot of grumbling. These kids, they're not listening to us. They're not, the skill acquisition isn't there. And so you heard teachers grumbling a lot, and you saw little behaviors come big behaviors in a hurry. So what we saw is we really didn't have that consistency and predictability across our environments within our mainstream population. And as a result, as we kept saying, well, what can we do different? What can we do different? So then we put our heads together. We had a superintendent that at that time, was very fortuitous and thinking, oh gosh, we really got to do something. And so we started looking at the research. We looked at Boys Town, what it had to offer, and it had to offer the things that appeared to be the things we were lacking. That consistency, that predictability, that common language. And in addition, I think it had the greatest thing was that it's all based on research-based best practice, which our superintendent, that was the bottom line. It had to be based on research-based best practice. So that's where we started having conversations with you, John, was at that point.
Okay. So again, going back to that kind of those early stages, were some of those conversations kind of initiated at the superintendent level, or was it you when you came into Horace Mann and go, wow, we really need to do something? And so you approached the superintendent, and thankfully he had open ears.
And actually, it was probably our teachers within that were just saying what we're doing isn't working, and I couldn't have agreed more. It just seemed like all we were hearing is these kids are getting tougher versus we know what to do, that we know how to do our job better. And so it was that coupled with a superintendent visit to our building and hearing that conversation that said, let's go to the next level. Let's start doing the research. And the research was at that time, and still, it kind of, we really looked for that common language as well as research-based best practice. That's where we really started leaning toward the Boys Town.
Okay. How would you describe the makeup of your staff back in those early days? Because, it's typically what, my role again is different. I talk to a lot of different people. But what we typically see is you've got some veteran staff that have been there for a long time. You got some people kind of in the middle, and then you've got some young, inexperienced, enthusiastic newbies that are, ready to set the world on fire. Would you say that was fairly representative of what you walked into, or not?
Very, very representative.
Okay.
I remember that we had several of our teachers were the very traditional, within the next 5 to 6 years of retirement, and maybe not as excited about bringing in that quote unquote one more thing for us to do at that time. And so to say that initially they were excited, I'm just saying I can't say they were excited, but also they weren't happy people, if that makes sense, because of the challenges they were facing every day.
Okay. Well, and that kind of leads into the next question I was going to ask is, again, you have that group of new teachers that are enthusiastic and probably to do whatever you tell them to do as the principal, as the boss. They're ready to jump on board and do whatever it is. But then you've got some of those people that have been there for a while. They're used to doing things their own way. And, especially if you've got a difficult environment, sometimes they can have some bad habits, right? So how did you sell that to your staff? I mean, if you can think back to those early days, how did you present that to them in a way that got them to the point where they're saying, okay, we're at least going to reluctantly give this a shot?
Mm-hmm. I think the frustrations, along with all we were doing was writing office referrals, and it felt like every leadership meeting was downtrodden. It was complaining. And so then when we brought, what can we do? Here's what, first of all, we identified kind of our needs assessment. What is our problem? And what are our problems that we're facing? And it became very apparent that it was that consistency among staff, predictability for our students and our staff members. What was going to happen when a student did this or tipped a chair over? One teacher was kicking a kid out of class for flipping a chair, and another one was keeping them in class and working through it. And so it kind of all became our needs assessment. Those were the results that we got, where we needed that consistency and predictability because a lot of our students were disconnected. Our population was one of such that we were a Title I school. And we had one of the toughest populations within Sioux Falls and South Dakota at that time. And so it became what do we have to lose is kind of more or less what kind of became that tipping point to say, let's give it a try.
Okay.
And I think too, with that as being one of those like young hotshot teachers coming in with the mix of teachers too at that time, I remember that Tara was such a leader in that it's going to be a building of feedback. We're all going to give feedback to each other. We're all going to listen to that. And that really helped shape and change how that implementation went to where it was like, yep, we're all going to hear it. We're all going to work together. And that piece unified us as where before it was so individualized. I'm doing this. And that feedback piece was crucial.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Tara, did you lose any staff in the process of making that change? I mean, sometimes some of those old timers, for lack of a better term, say, I'm not really interested in this. I'm out. We see that happen sometimes.
No, and along with us, another building, Rinberg, and I called that principal this morning because I said to her, I'd asked earlier and she had, everybody's busy, and she said, since we've implemented 60% fewer office referrals, even with hers, but we implemented pretty similar at the same time. We did one year and then they did the next year. And hers was the same. She had some tough cookies out there as well. And this is what I think we all were thinking. For those that are the negative at the end of their careers, good riddance. If it's not for them, good riddance. But it actually had the opposite effect. It was like it provided them the tools, the comments we heard, and that we still hear is it literally, it was their lifeboats. And when we say that, we're not just saying that. It provided them the words and the practice to make them successful. It didn't matter what they were teaching going out to recess or teaching math and reading. It just gave them the words and the ability to take their kids and classes and individualize them and understand that this group maybe doesn't need as much work or understanding of how to do this during math, but this one does. So it just really gave them the words no matter what setting they were in to be able to meet students where they were at.
Okay, good.
As I'm listening, I'm sorry to jump in, but as I'm listening to Tara, one of the things that really is jumping out is, you were talking about part of your needs assessment was because things were too individualized, but they were because one teacher was doing one thing, one teacher was doing another thing. But now then once you figured that out, then the effect that it had on your teachers was actually to help them to be individualized in the right way, rather
It
than,
was.
I don't know. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
It was. And, Jackie brought up a good point about it one time, as she said, well, they didn't want to give up their autonomy. They knew that collectively we were better, but there's still all that piece. We want to hold on to be able to do what we want to do. But in Jackie's words, it unified, it united us. Where before, prior to this, staff satisfaction, you could hear, even if they said they loved their job at work, it would be in the hallways, you would hear the grumbling about the kids or the parents, etc. And I don't remember the last Gallup poll that was given in our district that we weren't at the top. I mean, we were at the top with the staff that was working here with feeling like they made a difference, that they knew their role. Feedback had been given and they were able to give feedback. It didn't matter if they were an education assistant or a custodian, that we were all working. So we were unified within the whole process.
And you can be unified and consistent but individualized. It doesn't mean that because you're using that common language, it's common language, but it's not robotic language. It's not trying to turn it, but giving them the tools, the life jacket. I love that. The life jacket, the lifeboat that you need in order to be comfortable to flourish.
It really provided a language that no matter what a student, what they displayed, whether it was they're in survival mode walking in, they're angry at the world, it gave us the language to use at that moment, as well as the language to use during math if a student was frustrated, not understanding or needed help. Where before, I think our go-to was, we've already covered that. You know that answer. Where now we're like, gosh, I can tell you're frustrated. Can you tell me what part of that problem that you're having, that you need help with? It really gave us those tools to be able to teach to the children, and it took our emotion out and let us be what we're hired to do, and that's teach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, did you use a specific needs assessment, or did you just did you create your own?
We did create our own, like on just a white chart about, tell us what we're seeing, tell us where our problems are, and that's kind of how we went about it.
Yeah, and you found consistent themes across the board, and to do kind of sometimes that simple tool.
Right, we worked in within our tables. I think we had white sheets in the middle of every table, and then we just had people from each group tell what's our grade. But the emerging theme was, the behaviors are getting worse. Everybody was doing something different than the other one. And so then the kids were, that's not what my teacher said. And there just was there was a lot of dissonance and ambiguity that needed resolved.
I want to go back to the beginning kind of one more time, and then we'll move forward. I spent several years as a trainer out on the road, working with lots of different schools. I work kind of indirectly with our trainers now. And it's interesting because we go all over the country, and it's not unusual during some of those initial trainings for there to be at least a pocket of people that will say, yeah, that's all great, but I don't think it's going to work with our kids. And in fact, I think, Tara, the last time we talked about that, you even said you were one of those people. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that, and then what the process was that helped you kind of move past that?
So I remember Susan Lambert teaching and doing some talking, and myself and Deb Peterson, we interjected. It's like, no, but what do you do? Because our students are they're way tougher. They're not going to comply to that. And I mean, literally, we wrote a note to each other while Susan was teaching. This will never work for us. We did that. And we laugh at that now because, like I said, I don't think until everybody's working not only for the same goal, but learning some of the same research-based best practices and implementing. And Jackie brought it up. The feedback to each other has been critical because every one of us is going to fall short, just like parenting, just like me being Jackie's colleague and falling short. I need to be able to hear what's not working for her. We do that every day at Horace Mann, give each other feedback. And so that helped that accountability along with our weekly meetings during that pre-implementation, during that implementation phase. And here we are over 10 years later, fully implemented. And it's during all of our PD. It comes up, we take individual student situations, and we put them live in groups, and everybody works through them in groups.
Do you remember a point either in training or afterwards where maybe the little bit of the switch was flipped and thought, maybe this will work? Whether it's our program or any, whatever, I think, there's lots of obviously good programs out there, but do you remember kind of that point where you thought, we might be onto something. Maybe this is going to be successful?
It was a pivotal moment. And it was because you guys had actually come out and trained, and it was a checkup. Susan was back there, and it was with a particular student and it was when we still had mainstream building right here. And I remember thinking, I've worked with this student for the last half hour, which in my mind felt like all day.
Yeah.
In which oftentimes as teachers, your teachers will say this child has ruined the whole day. But it was one of those very humbling moments, because I remember exactly which room it was in, and Susan was standing in the doorway, and I literally put my hands up and I went, and she literally did the mom, turn around, stick with it. And I'm like, how much longer am I going to stick with it? Well, we stuck with it for almost 2 hours that one day with this one student. And she said, I remember her saying, it won't be that long the next time. And in my mind, I thought, she's crazy. It will be. And, but it was very pivotal, because we did not have that scenario with that student. And that student knew every time we kept him a little longer, and then we were putting him out. A little longer, putting him out. We didn't that day. And we never had that same scenario again. And so we literally built off that scenario of, gosh, if this works with this, it's going to work with another scenario. So that duration of that event never occurred again. And
Okay.
so it was the language and that teaching, that pivotal moment, that you're right, it does work.
So you guys, you both have talked about, the kind of the feedback loop and how important that has been for you, and how it's kind of become part of your culture, is that you're comfortable, giving each other feedback and helping each other and really working as a team. And you've mentioned the common language several times about how important that is. So once you kind of get in that early implementation phase, and you had that experience of seeing some success. So if you felt it, chances are, your teachers probably start to see that. But at the same time, you're still in those early stages. Can either of you kind of think back to some of those beginning things where, hey, we feel like we're making some momentum, but you know what? Kids are still tough, and teachers are going to have a bad day. So what were some of those early challenges kind of back at that beginning stage, and what did you do to overcome some of those things?
I'll speak, and Jackie can jump in on this one. So historically, if a student destroyed a classroom or, smoked a teacher in the face or any of that, that student was going home. That district discipline plan, it was boom. It was solid. You don't get to do that in the Sioux Falls School District. Everybody deserves the right to be safe, etc. And so what we learned, though, is with that implementation, that the more we actually used the teaching that we learned from it, and what is the plan teaching or the pre-teaching that some people call it, is that the better off we were. But as teachers, that was a hard sell. I think Jackie remembers initially that, how much do we have to plan teach? And then this is where I'll let Jackie speak to that, because this is one of those pivotal moments that really evolved and changed. So our kids aren't suspended anymore as a result of this. I'll let Jackie, you speak to that.
Yeah, very much so. Those darn words of plan teaching would come back all the time in meetings, and you would get there and you'd want to roll your eyes and be like, but I am plan teaching. And I can remember a specific moment sitting down with a parent, and at a tough meeting, we still were having trouble. This girl, oh my goodness, she's not making it. What do we do? And it was talking with those parents that was like, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm dropping the ball here. I'm not plan teaching enough. I'm missing this skill right here. You know what? We'll increase that. it would get better. That's a big change. I remember we all had to wrap our mind around, no matter how many times we would hear that. Still, maybe it wasn't at the right time of day, or maybe it wasn't as many times. I also remember that we got caught in a cycle too of wanting to do automatic referrals, and that was frustrating because we were used to kids, leaving our room for those bigger behaviors and things like that. So wrapping our mind around, there are automatic this, it's not automatic this. We're really going to rely on that teaching to each skill ahead of time before we can go right to that consequence. And I think we were just really good and open with conversations, and Tara was amazing too, where she really listened to that and would seek advice from John and you guys. I remember her, she being like, okay, we'll give a call, let's see what they think too. And so you guys' support was huge for us at that time too, when we were in that beginning implementation stage.
That lifeline was a big help to us because, I think it's, any training can feel like, oh my gosh, we have all the answers from this training. But in the moment, when things get tough, it's easy to have your mind switch back to that traditional mindset. But we were holding each other so accountable. But is that what the research is saying? But is that what they're saying? Just a minute, let me give Susan a call. Let me, and that's kind of where our heads went right away, is instead of us trying to guess and getting emotionally all, oh my gosh, let's go back to exactly what we're taught to do and the person that taught us. And that really was the lifeline. Another thing that was huge, that was a big change is, and Jackie's going to roll her eyes, but it used to be when we brought our kids to say, oh gosh, I'm sorry for, or gosh, they're going to spend some time in in-school suspension, the teacher used to sigh in relief. But then all of a sudden, I had teachers challenge me, and one that's, you could see her face, that when we would say, you know what, he really needs to spend some time in ISS, we need to work through, do some more problem solving. And she was like, I want that student back in class. He's going to learn the most in class from me. And that is the challenge here. I mean, our teachers, and Jackie would concur, one of our biggest things is, even when our kids do something, which is that level 5 on our district policy, that is a non-negotiable, with maybe bringing something that could be conceived as a weapon or something, our teachers are like, so he's going to learn better at home not to do that? I mean, so no matter the behavior, teachers wanted those kids back in class, and we started noticing the successes versus those skill deficits or those lagging skills.
Well, and getting to a point where your teachers are taking that ownership is awesome, because that, to me, that's just what that's telling you, is they're taking such ownership of the program, of your kids, of understanding how to reach them best. So that's amazing.
I want to share, sorry to interrupt. There's a great comment in the chat box that I want to make sure that Tara and Jackie know, that Selena made the comment of, that's amazing. I like how you allow your staff to understand that mistakes are going to happen, but with ongoing communication, the idea of being open to growth and learning new approaches to teaching is vital to the implementation of the curriculum and what students take away from what's being taught. So just wanted to share and make sure you guys both saw that.
That is critical. And I can tell you as a leader, it's very humbling when somebody sees the grandma of the program kind of nodding their head or maybe slipping on that traditional mama slope of, oh buddy, we've talked about this before. But I'm thinking of Ross Peterson, who so eloquently, as an education assistant, when I was doing that early in the implementation, said, Mrs. Eckstein, do you want me to step in? And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh. And then later, he hates it because I use this example all the time. He'd say, I am so sorry. And it's like, I would, if I were you, I'd feel worse if I didn't do it, because that is with that integrity that we are implementing. And we're, every one of you are going to fall on that slope during implementation. I would challenge anybody on that, because tough kids are tough kids. And as we know, society hasn't gotten easier with COVID. These kids did not acquire that resilience and that grit that is necessary for them to be successful in any of our classrooms in any district right now. And what this did is, literally, we have a floor in our house now in our district. We are one elementary among 24. And the schools that really embrace this and use it with that integrity, not just that fidelity, but with that integrity of, dang it, I can feel myself slipping. You know what? I know that this student needs to breathe, and I need to breathe, and I need to problem solve. And then giving that feedback to each other and practicing in another setting, just like we're having our students practice those skills, we expect them to have when they should have it, when we haven't all acquired those resilient skills yet. But that's what we do. It's constant practice and bringing those back to our PD and to our weekly collaboration.
You know, a few minutes ago, you both referenced planned teaching and the importance of that. And so I just want to kind of touch on that just real quickly, because I know there's probably a lot of people that are listening to us that may not necessarily know what that is, because it's kind of some Boys Town lingo kind of. But I'm glad you brought it up because it is so important. But one of the kind of hallmarks of our program is what we call planned teaching. And basically what that is identifying skill deficits that we know maybe a particular student or group of students or a classroom has, and identifying an upcoming situation where they're going to need those skills and talking to those kids and teaching that skill ahead of time so that when the event actually gets ready to happen, they're more likely to be successful. And so it's constantly revisiting those skills and laying out those expectations. It's kind of like, you know, we do that with a fire drill and we do that with a tornado drill. Those of you that are in the Midwest know all about those, right? And the reason we practice them ahead of time is so if the event happens, our kids are ready for it. But too oftentimes, you know, as parents, as educators, we don't do that. We wait for the behavior to happen and then we respond to it, and then we're surprised when it doesn't go well, right? So that planned teaching is such an important piece, and it's talking to kids ahead of time and practicing and getting that information kind of at the front of their brain so that they're ready to use it. And it's just an absolutely critical piece.
Oh, wait, I got a question on that. Sorry.
Okay, sure. Jump in.
So Tara and Jackie, can you talk about planned teaching? Like, as John said, planned teaching helps students so much, being that proactive. How does it help your staff too? How does having those types of strategies help your staff?
Well, we recently had a donor in our community pay for all of our schools that were Title I schools, which we have a lot. I mean, we're over 25,000 students in our district, and a lot of students in the Washington Pavilion. Okay, Horace Mann has the toughest K through 5 students right here. The students with the most lagging skills, the greatest skill deficits here, and they come from these elementaries, and these other elementaries know this. Well, I can tell you it had nothing to do with Tara and Jackie, but just good teaching, planned teaching, that when we went to the pavilion, we were the only school in the district that did not have kids climbing over the top of this beautiful pavilion, these chairs, standing up, getting up and going to the bathroom, getting drinks, things like that. And we are supposedly, we have the children that are the most violent, the most reluctant. And, but I can tell you the difference is with our implementation, and we have outside districts as well in this time. It was our schools that had this training with that planned teaching training and able to respond that made the difference. Jackie heard it over and over, and she didn't even attend from the district. And I'll let her kind of talk to that too.
Yeah, plan teaching is just so amazing. Once it becomes ingrained in you, you don't even really realize that you do it. It's just such a natural thing. I can walk in to a classroom and you just hear them just explaining and going through those steps of how they're going to work with their partner on this, talking about this problem, or how when they go out to recess, this is what they're going to be saying. It's so natural. And then I'll hear our teachers out working with their own kids at home, and they'll be going through steps of plan teaching too, because it's just so who you are. But you can definitely, it doesn't matter where you walk into, you can, whether it's our Washington Pavilion field trip, whether it's another field trip out there, those that are prepared have those skills. And it's our parents from our students that ask us a lot of, well, how do you do that? You know, we're going to Walt Disney World. What can I prepare? What can I do? And it's really those skills of thinking of where can you see a problem behavior? Let's talk about it ahead of time.
And what the buildings that have the Boys Town training are our toughest buildings, and they too would tell you that prior to them having it, they didn't even understand how to recognize. And there's a natural thinking with teachers that we don't have time to do one more thing. But what this does is this is what's up front and you're able to teach. So our students also have some of the most lagging academic deficits, skill deficits, but we are the students that make some of the most gains as noted by our district And so, I mean, what it does is it prepares students in a way to be more successful during that academic time. You get a bigger bang for your buck. You're able to maximize those instructional moments because you're preparing students to be successful versus reacting to behaviors during the lesson.
Truly, it doesn't take long. I mean, you can get in and out in a couple minutes, and it can be for the whole class, and it can be individualized. Even after you do the whole class thing, you know you have a specific student who's struggling with one specific thing. Going over it, it could take a minute to do it without one student. Not even.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's one of the things we hear a lot of times in training is just that very thing. Oh, I just don't have time. And my response to that usually has been the same. You don't have time not to. If you can put that work in on the front end and be committed to addressing those things that are causing, those behavioral problems and get those dealt with and get those improving, you're actually giving yourself more time in the long run. But it takes that commitment to being willing to say, I'm going to put my math book away for a second because this is important and we've got to get this, dealt with and fixed before we can move on. So absolutely.
I had a couple of questions in the chat.
Sure.
I want to make sure because I think we've kind of talked about, we've mentioned MTSS, multi-tiered systems of supports, but I had two questions of, can this program work in a K through 12 program, and can this program be implemented in a day school program, a behavior school? I just want to make sure that we include that in our kind of talk about that, because right now this is not just an elementary school program.
Right. Yeah. And we do have a program for both of those settings. They're a little different because obviously working with high school kids is different than working with elementary kids. But some would probably argue that sometimes the behavior of a 12th grader is not that much different than a second grader, right? And vice versa. But what we know is that sound teaching practices are sound teaching practices. Now, again, I'm going to talk to my junior in high school a little bit differently, but sound teaching is sound teaching. And so we do have a program that's designed specifically for high school kids. We do have a day school program. So there's a whole continuum of services that we do provide to those schools, because you're right, it isn't, we can't just have them, in the, having Tara do her thing until they're 5th grade and then go, good luck to you, right? We want that to be consistent throughout. So yeah, we've got a program for everybody. And gosh, if you'd like to learn more, we certainly can. We'll give you our website and my phone number afterwards if you ever want to talk a little further about having something maybe come to your school. So anyway, so obviously again, as you've kind of gotten over that hump, right? Things are rolling along and you're giving each other feedback and you're doing your planned teaching and you're making headway and kids are doing better and kids are struggling being kids and you're doing all those things. What were some of and either of you can speak to this, what were just some of the things that you found to be helpful in just kind of maintaining that positive momentum? What is there anything that you could, looking back, identify, boy, this really helped us kind of keep the ball rolling in the right direction?
Jackie, can you think of from the teacher point of view before you became admin?
For me, it was really our practice opportunities that we had that Tara talked about, those practice opportunities that focused specifically on the language and using those, because we would have EAs that would change from year to year. So that was really helpful that we had those opportunities to practice with them. And I think the more reliant that as we grew and could change from just the common language part was being able to focus on that data. Because I know that here I am when I would get to SAT meetings as a teacher, I would say things like, well, I feel like they're always doing this. It seems like it's always this, and really didn't focus so much on that frequency, intensity, and duration of behaviors. And so once we got a clear approach to really diving into that, that was super helpful for me as a teacher as well. So I could take the emotion out and really focus on what that student needed.
And I think at the administrative level, I think this program's only going to be as strong as Jackie and I are. I think at the end of the day, if we aren't modeling it, if we aren't living it, if we aren't speaking it, that the integrity of the program, that believability is not going to be there. If we don't follow through when they see us working with a student. If we don't use plan teaching, if we don't use that continuum of correction correctly, if we don't maintain that relationship during those neutral settings when we are doing that teachers aren't going to do it. And the other thing is, whatever we do in our district, it is a non-negotiable, and we just know that, if that makes sense. So we are MTSS, and they're just really rolling it in big and strong right now. And what we know without MTSS is that multi-tiered system of supports. And our district is also becoming what we call PBIS. However, the good news is they all know we need this language within that, and it fits within that. It is what gives us the words. Both of those other things, they're great. We need those to be successful with the district with as dynamic as we are, with the needs that we need to be able to identify that tier 3 student, tier 2 student, tier 1 student. We need students to be able to, at the end of the day, do quick check-in, check-out. We understand that all with that, but we know without the right language that we are going to give students a mixed message. We couldn't survive right now with the toughest of our tough students, and especially after coming off COVID, without it. So it's the non-negotiable. Every week, it's part of our collaboration. We bring, what were those behaviors? What'd you do? How did you respond? Did you do that reasons and practice during that plan teaching? Because without those reasons and practice, just like a good academic lesson, the student's not going to retain it. And I mean, we use that with that integrity, and we use, those are words teachers give us. And so they know it's a non-negotiable, and they work to tell each other, oh boy, right now you probably better go back there, sister. And you need to stick with it. Some of the same words that we heard. So that's how we maintain it. It's a non-negotiable now. We've invested in it to do anything other than revisit it in staff notes, in parent notes, on our parent link, where we show how they can do it at home, some of the stuff we're doing at school, the words, the social skills, we share all of that. And I think that helps keep that momentum going. Don't you think, Jack?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I was going to say, as Tara uses that word non-negotiable, I mean, everybody in the building knows that. It's clear that it is. And it's that part that we all hold each other accountable. It's not just Tara giving the feedback. It's that teachers feel comfortable to give feedback. EAs feel comfortable, behavior team. And I think that really has kept the momentum going, is that everybody, it wouldn't matter who you are, you'd walk into this building and you would be getting feedback. And we all know we wouldn't make it if we didn't.
And so now, because it's been so successful here in another school, literally, I mean, one of my toughest jobs is I'm on call day and night, because teachers or principals or district people are calling all the time, how to help them improve that. And I think Jackie would tell you, so now they're asking our people to push into other buildings to give that feedback and to teach teachers within our mainstream buildings how to really kind of keep that feedback going. And so that's how you keep it going is, like I said, I think it's kind of like, whether it be your curriculum, whether it be, your district, this is an expectation. And in order for us to be as successful and as happy, I think our Gallup poll speaks for itself. We're happier when we know what to say and do, even when a student when you're hearing the saddest story that you have ever heard about a student, but you know how to help that student transition into a classroom. You know the words of the toughest, and you know the words of the most gifted students ever, how to bring them in. And everybody's more successful.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point, Tara, because there's no question that it kind of goes back to that. It takes a village kind of thing, right? And you need your teachers to buy in. You need your paras, your EAs to buy in. You need your administration to buy in. But you're right. It starts at the top. And, again, if I think back to the time that I spent, on the road as a trainer, it was always really interesting to me, because we'd go into a school wherever, and sometimes there were several different scenarios that would play out. Sometimes the principal would be right there front and center and participating every bit along the way, and you could tell they were in it to win it. and they were going to be a part of that. But to be completely honest about it, there were other places where the administrator wasn't there. It was like, this is something the teachers are going to do. I'm busy making phone calls and sending emails or doing whatever. Or we've even had administrators show up to our training and they put their laptop up and they're, doing all this stuff. And it's like, well, it's great that you're there, but you're sending a very clear message to your staff that you're not really a part of this. Now, at the same time, I also think it's important for folks to know that, because we'll get an individual teacher that will come to our workshop. They can go back and be successful. They can make an impact. There's teachers all over making impact academically, making, impacts behaviorally for kids, and they are on an island. Maybe they don't have the support of the teacher next door or their administration or their parents, but they're making headway. So good things can happen, but there's no question that for optimal change and to get the kind of results that we would all like to have, it's got to be a team effort. And there's no question that it takes active leadership at the top. And the two of you have certainly epitomized that. So, okay. So, because I said we get about 10 or 15 minutes here left. If you guys could think back, just looking back over your time in the roles that you've had, is there anything that you do differently at this point? Was there a mistake you made? Like, oh man, that was whatever. Is anything different? Was there a big mistake or anything that you learned from? Tell us a little bit about that. Or maybe everything was perfect. I don't know.
I think the thing that I can tell you is that when we did the initial training, our mindset, maybe at that time when we started hearing, oh gosh, you can work the toughest of the toughest kids, you can make that change. Our mindsets initially were like when we first started hearing and that, oh no, this isn't. But if we had to do it over again, I think that's what we would start with is maybe having one of you guys tell our staff, because I'm not sure, like I said, I know at first we were like this, there's no way that this can work with our school, with our kids. And now I feel like anybody that we have shared or the teachers that we've worked with, and like you said, John, I think it's so true. Once you're trained in this, there's not a building I couldn't teach in. I would challenge you to find a building that I wouldn't be successful in. I'm that confident in my teaching skills. And anybody that's been trained like what under this, they would say that. Dr. Stabum, as well as Dr. Brian Maher, our former superintendent, they walk into our classrooms and these are their words. I believe I could take these teachers from this building and put them in any classroom in the district and they're going to be successful. And keep in mind, we're almost 26,000 students pre-K through 12. And he said, I can't say there's another building in our district like that. And I can tell you that's true. But I believe the difference now is we have that ability to show and tell people, look at the success. This student you heard about that everybody heard about in the district that was on the news, that student, guess where he's at? He's successfully full-time integrated. He's a leader on a sports team. He is, we have these success stories. They're one of our freshmen in every AP course at Lincoln High School. And they're kids that cleaned our clock earlier on. But when after that they actually were in these programs, had the opportunity to be taught the way that we teach at Horace Mann, I feel like we were able to teach those foundational skills. And the teachers, when they were done at the end of the day, they weren't exhausted. They were wanting more. Where before, at the end of the day, all they wanted was to get out of the building. And that's not the case now. It is, oh my gosh, I can hardly wait to share what just happened or how this student just met this goal. That's the difference. And so if I had to do it again, I'd be saying, give me a success. I want to really see the success. I read the research, but somebody else needs to convince me and these people early on, because now we speak for ourselves in the district.
Yeah. Well, I know you've told me, Tara, I think not too long ago that other schools have, reach out to you guys for help and that you've done training even for other schools. So, again, I think that's a good thing for people out there to know. Tara and her team and several of your staff over the years have not just gone through training to implement in their classrooms, but they've actually learned to be trainers. And so they provide the Boys Town model training themselves. And so they're carrying that weight and providing, and they've been so successful that they've actually even taken it on the road to other schools in their district. So that again just I think speaks to again their commitment to the program, and certainly the success that they didn't just see it in their building. Others were seeing the success and wanted to be a part of that. So that's awesome. Okay, so let's say I'm a principal from a neighboring district, and I've heard that things are going pretty well at Horace Mann. What would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give somebody that's just, hey, we're kind of at the beginning. We're where you guys were 15 years ago. That's where we're at now. What would you suggest? What kind of couple pieces of advice would you give for them?
First, we invite them to come see, because I think seeing is believing, and to see our results. And we do get a lot of what you're talking about from every surrounding AA and even some A schools that have come in to look at it and to try to develop and emulate it. But see, I think part of it is if you can see our student data and see kind of how that you're a building that is no longer, you don't have teachers raising their voice, you don't hear threats. We never stop teaching. I mean, and I feel like that's kind of cliche, stolen from you guys, but that really is true. We do exactly what our contract says, every one of us. We're here, we get to teach every day. And I think that in itself is the greatest thing, is to tell the teachers, guess what? If we do this, it's going to be a learning curve, but you're going to be able to do what you know you've been hired to do. You're going to be able to teach. You don't have to worry about thinking, well, I need to be the parent. I need to be the judge or the police officer. I get to do what I was hired to do finally, just teach. And that's what it does. It provides you the framework and the skill set to be able to implement that and just teach. So you get to celebrate the successes, and you see them. The data shows it to you at the end of every day and at the end of every week. Jackie, what can you jump into that?
Yeah, I would add on to building a strong leadership team with people who are going to, number one, not be afraid to give feedback, not afraid to ask those questions, but also who are going to embrace that uncomfortable and embrace that, like, I'm not going to do everything right. I am going to make mistakes, and I'm going to need to ask questions because I don't know what to do in this scenario. So I would say couple that with a strong leader who's going to say, yeah, we have non-negotiables, but finding that team who's going to help build those strong non-negotiables.
And grace is in the teaching, just what Jackie said. You are going to make a mistake, and the only time anybody's going to get critical feedback at Horace Mann is if you completely go away and say, oh, this doesn't work. And that's when I'm going to challenge, show me what you did prior to saying it didn't work. Because what we have learned is when you implement with the integrity that we have been taught, eventually you see progress. It doesn't mean there isn't hiccups or there aren't hiccups. What it does mean is that that with the integrity, you're going to see gains. And that's academic as well as behaviorally. And like I said, we have across our district, the buildings we've trained have had everything from Leader and Me, the zones of regulation, PBIS. Can you think of anything, another thing? We've had everything, buildings have had so much unique training, but the one thing we've heard loud and clear is this training put the floor in the house. So if people think, oh, it's one more thing, we have to get rid of everything else. Nope, what it did is it just strengthened your tool belt and gave you the words at the right time and told you what not to get into, how not to get into conflict cycles, what words maybe not to say when a student is in a downstairs brain.
Yeah, the great examples. It's interesting because, again, knowing Tara, knowing you as long as I have, it's just interesting kind of the transition, because I've been in the kind of the unique spot of interacting, getting to meet you right from the very beginning and having come up and do some of the training, to those early days where we were getting fairly frequent phone calls. Hey, I got this kid. We've tried this and it's not working. What do you suggest? Or, talk to us about, whatever this particular issue was from training, and we would revisit those. And there was a lot of that at the beginning. Not an unusual amount, but there was a fair amount of that. And But what that told us was these guys are really trying, right? And you're exactly right. It doesn't matter what the program is, there's going to be hiccups, and it's important that people understand there's no magic bullet, there's no secret ingredient. It takes time, it takes consistency, it takes predictability, it takes all those things. And so over time, we stopped getting as many phone calls from Tara, and then all of a sudden we got the phone call, we'd like to become our own trainers. That was one of the next calls we got, which again just spoke to not only are they seeing some of the success and they've taken the ownership, they want to continue to build this and make this a sustainable thing and really own it. Yeah, it's been a really interesting and fun transformation to watch you guys go through. And you're right. I think for those of you that have joined us today, you know, Tara and Jackie, I think, are both the kind of people that are quick to give their teaching staff the credit, and they certainly deserve the credit because they're in the trenches doing the hard work. But again, it starts at the top. It absolutely starts at the top, and it's just, I think, a credit to the both of you that you guys have, you know, been so committed and have set the tone and have done the hard work to make that just part of your culture. And so when you talk about, we teach all the time, I want to make sure that people out there know that you're not just talking about academics. You're talking about behavioral teaching, and we do it all the time. Am I right?
And I think that's a big pivotal piece, is oftentimes people think they don't have time. But the thing is learning that all the time is the right time for that teaching. And boy, you hear teachers literally even on the way to lunch. The plan teaching occurs, but they're prompting and giving those positive accolades. One of the things I wanted to point out is that the things you hear our teachers say, it's such a different culture. It's, oh my gosh, did you hear so-and-so is like, I mean, he was fully back integrated. He had no referrals for this. It's nothing but, it truly is nothing but celebrations. And when it is the downtime, or the, oh my gosh, this student is struggling, those are so short, and that we really get together and collaborate on it. And it's like, we're able to identify and provide that support, that plan teaching, that good practice and reasons, and we see that gains, so we're celebrating again. Yeah. So, I mean, you hear our culture and climate it's so different with it, and none of us would go back. We have teachers that would say, if we ever went away from it, they would be done. Yeah. And those are those traditional style teachers that came in because they would never go back.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about those downtimes, you know, and I think the cool thing is about when you're always going to have those downtimes, but the difference is now you've got those tools and you kind of know, hey, this isn't working. Well, let's try this. Let's do this. But it's all within that framework that you already have. So you don't have to have people getting what I like to refer to as unnecessarily creative, because usually that doesn't go very well, right? You've got the boundaries already. Say, okay, we need to make sure we're doing plan teaching. You know, is our positive to negative interactions with this kid, is that where it should be? You know, how often have we targeted the right skills? Are we doing enough social teaching compared to the academic teaching? How's my relationship with those kids? All those kinds of things. But you've got this nice little boundary to operate within, so everybody can draw on that and rely on that, and again, relying on each other and that feedback and all those things, and that's truly what helps you get through those down times for sure.
We find that we don't blame our kids and our parents at all. You never hear teachers blaming kids and parents. That really is that used to be the whole foundation of the conversation prior to this. But now it's like, oh my gosh, what can we do different to support it? And in the words of you guys, that we still, if we can predict it, we can prevent it. Yeah. You know, so. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think we're about out of time, so I sure appreciate it. It's been great having you guys here. It's just nice to really hear from some folks that are, out there on the front lines doing all the hard work, and we sure appreciate all the insight that you've had. It's nice for people to hear the highs and the lows and the struggles and the successes that you go through to get where you've been. So again, I want to thank the two of you for being willing to jump on with us. It's been really cool for us to be kind of a small part of that. So it's cool to hear the good things that are happening. So I'll turn it back over to Stephanie. But again, Jackie and Tara, thanks so much for joining us.
And thank you. cannot again, Tara and Jackie, thank you so much. And for everybody who joined us, we have recorded this. And really quick, before you all log off, I just want to make sure that you all are able to see, this is our website, boystowntraining.org. I sent you the link and I will include that in the email, but you can learn more about the behavior management model that Tara and Jackie have implemented, as well as our other versions and variations of our model. And then also want to make sure that everybody knows where our resources are, because we have a lot of free resources here on the website, so you can get a little bit more feel. So if you're not sure, if you want to learn a little bit more, you want to learn a little bit more about plan teaching and get a feel for that, you can see here we have, it's kind of way down here, if you predict it, you can plan for it. That's going to tell you a lot more about plan teaching. If you want to know about the PBIS and the Boys Town Education Model, we have lots of tools and resources on there too. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will send you out the link. We will send you out the link of the recording, and we will send you out some tools and resources, and also in a little packet, just as another thank you for joining us. And let us know if you have any questions, and reach out at any time. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.